Hello from the Connection Audit. We're your hosts, Kirsten and Blake.
Today we're asking what is really driving people away from mainstream dating and towards E&M, swinging, and other alternative spaces. Is it just novelty, or are people tired of systems that feel high volume, low trust, emotionally draining, and thin on real connection?
Because if we misread that shift, we reach for the wrong explanation. What looks like thrill-seeking is often a search for better context, clearer boundaries, more honesty, and a way of relating that feels more real.
This matters even more when we talk about women. When women stop performing and start choosing, standards sharpen. What matters is not just chemistry, but calm, fit, safety, discretion, and whether someone feels easy to be around or like hard work.
So this episode is an audit of what people are moving away from, what they're hoping to find, and what it takes to welcome curiosity without rewarding poor conduct or emotional chaos.
Because better connection rarely comes from more noise, more speed, or more access. It comes from more context, more discernment, and safer ways of relating.
So let's get into it. What changes when women stop performing and start choosing?
This is the Connection Audit.
So, to really start our audit of the culture today, we sort of have to look closely at the reality of mainstream exhaustion, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. The landscape of conventional dating has, frankly, become incredibly emotionally expensive.
Right.
We are seeing a massive, undeniable pattern of dating fatigue. I mean, people are just fundamentally drained by it.
Spot on. And, the data around this is incredibly telling. If you look at the current industry realities, it's about, 1 in 10 UK adults are visiting dating services.
Which sounds like a thriving environment on paper.
It does. Yeah, it sounds huge. But the use across the top surface, platforms like Tinder is actually declining. People are leaving the biggest rooms.
Right, because we really need to sit with what it actually feels like to be inside those rooms right now.
Yeah. You've probably felt this yourself, honestly. That moment you look at your phone, you see 5 generic hey messages, and you just feel, completely drained.
That isn't you losing interest in connection, by the way. That's your brain refusing to engage with low-effort noise.
Absolutely.
That is the core of the issue here. We have to ask why that fatigue is setting in so heavily. And the reality is that conventional apps rely on interactions that are scripted, highly gamified, and fundamentally low trust.
It's a conveyor belt logic.
100%. It relies on algorithmic steering and what we might call shop window sorting. You are presented as a product on a shelf, right?
A product waiting to be bought.
Right. And you are asked to make snap judgments based on minimal, often superficial context. It completely flattens the human experience.
It really does. You are not a person with boundaries, a specific communication style, or unique emotional needs in that space. You're a static image and a witty one-liner.
Which completely strips away self-authorship. Instead of defining how you want to relate to someone, you were handed this inherited blueprint and told to just swipe left or right within those narrow parameters.
It makes me think about the environment we are forcing people into. Consider standing in a loud, crowded fast food queue where everyone is shouting their order at the exact same time.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Right. The lighting is harsh, the floors are sticky, the noise is overwhelming, and you just feel rushed to pick something off the laminated menu board.
You aren't even thinking about what you actually desire in that moment.
No, you're panicking. You're looking at the person behind you tapping their foot. You order the easiest combo meal just to get out of the way.
Yeah.
And that is what the mainstream dating experience has become. Now compare that to walking into a quiet, reservations-only dining room.
It's a completely different atmosphere.
Totally. The lighting is calm, the pace is entirely yours, the waiter isn't rushing you, and you can actually hear the person across the table.
And that's the migration we're seeing. If people are fleeing that noisy fast food queue, the next logical question is, are people actually looking for extreme new relationship styles, or are they just desperate to get out of the noise?
Are they just looking for a quiet room where they can hear themselves think?
That is 100% the right question to ask.
Yeah.
The exhaustion comes from the noise and the lack of trust. And because people are desperate for that quieter dining room, they are migrating.
Which brings us to a phenomenon that the industry has labeled the vanilla tourist.
Yes. So platforms like Field have reported a 30% year-on-year growth. And the cultural narrative quickly became that mainstream daters, the so-called vanilla tourists, are flooding into alternative relationship spaces.
But we really need to gently challenge that cultural myth, don't we?
We do.
Because the label vanilla tourist is catchy, sure, but it is highly deceptive. It makes it sound like people are just bored and looking for a freak show to observe.
Spot on. It sounds like gawping. It frames the movement as people seeking novelty, as if they are just tourists wandering into a neighborhood they don't belong in, looking for a quick thrill before going back to their normal lives.
Right. And that's not what's happening at all.
No. What we are seeing is not a sudden, widespread desire for transgression or extreme adventure. The reality is a migration away from prescription.
And when we say prescription, we mean the traditional relationship escalator, right?
Absolutely. The rigid societal script that says you meet, you date exclusively, you move in together, you marry, you have children, and you never, ever deviate.
People are finally recognizing that this single prescribed escalator just does not serve everyone.
It doesn't. People are looking for environments where they can actually define what they want. They are rejecting the assumption that one inherited blueprint suits everyone.
It really is a search for self-authorship. They want to say, here are my boundaries, here is my pace, and here is what I am actually available for.
Yes.
And they want a space where saying that doesn't make them an outlier, but rather is the basic requirement for entry.
And, this search for self-authorship leads us to a really fascinating demographic shift, one that completely challenges the idea of fading relevance in midlife.
Oh, this is one of my favorite data points.
Right. The second fastest growing demographic entering these alternative intentional spaces is women over 40. That demographic is up by 16%.
Which completely shatters the cultural assumption that older women simply fade into the background when it comes to desire and relational standards.
It shatters it entirely.
Because if we look at the SWAN data, which is this massive multi-year study of women's health, it completely dismantles the narrative we've been fed.
The data is undeniable here. The study of women's health across the nation, alongside findings from the Menopause Society, reveals that over 75% of middle-aged women report that sex remains deeply important to them.
Over 75%.
Yes. Furthermore, a meaningful proportion of women well over 65 remain sexually active and highly interested in connection.
Yet society constantly frames midlife women as past it, as if crossing a certain age threshold invisibly erases their humanity and their desires.
We really want you, the listener, to reflect on that for a moment. How often does society tell you that midlife means a decline in appetite, a loss of relevance, or that you should just be, grateful for whatever attention you receive?
The data proves the complete opposite. This is not a demographic that is quietly asking for permission to still be desired.
Absolutely not. What we are seeing is a group of people who have developed stronger standards, have a much lower tolerance for nonsense, and possess a powerfully felt right to choose.
Yes.
They're not fading. They are simply becoming more discerning. They have economic power, they have life experience, and they are refusing to settle for relationships that drain them.
So if people are fleeing that noisy fast food queue and women over 40 are leading a charge toward intentionality, the next logical question is what happens to their behavior when they finally sit down in that quiet room?
Because the rules of engagement have to change.
They have to. We have to unpack what happens when women stop performing and start choosing.
There is a profound psychological shift that occurs here. It is a shift from an external center of gravity to an internal one.
Right. And to understand this, we have to look at what performing actually entails in this context.
Well, when someone is operating from an external center of gravity, when they are performing for the dating market, their internal monologue is entirely focused outward. They are constantly self-monitoring.
They're asking, am I legible? Am I pleasing? Am I non-threatening? Am I desirable according to the conventional script?
Yes. They might laugh at jokes that aren't funny or suppress their own needs to appear low maintenance.
Ugh, the low maintenance trap.
It's so common. Or they tolerate poor communication just to keep a connection alive.
And it is exhausting because it requires constantly adjusting your own shape to fit a container someone else built.
100%.
But when the shift happens, when a woman starts choosing, that center of gravity moves inward, the questions change completely.
The focus becomes, does this fit my body? Does this fit my pace? Does this align with my values? Does this actually fit my life?
It is no longer about twisting oneself to be chosen. It is about evaluating whether the other person is worthy of an invitation into her life.
And this is where a critical misunderstanding often occurs in modern dating dynamics. Selectivity is frequently and wrongly interpreted as a loss of desire.
I have to play devil's advocate here, though, because I hear this all the time. If a woman is swiping left 99% of the time or going months without entertaining a date, from the outside, it absolutely looks like her desire has vanished.
Right.
How do we distinguish between someone who is genuinely turned off by the dating world and someone who is just safeguarding their energy?
It is a vital distinction. A sharper filter is actually a sign of stronger discernment, not diminished appetite. The desire hasn't vanished. The willingness to compromise has.
That makes so much sense.
Women in this stage are simply less willing to spend their desire badly. They refuse to waste it on ambiguous, low-effort interactions. They still have the desire, but they are safeguarding it for interactions that are actually worthy of their energy, time, and emotional investment. They recognize that their energy is finite and precious.
Which brings up the concept of advanced pattern recognition. And this is something that is so often unfairly labeled as just being picky.
Oh, picky is such a loaded word.
It really is. When we talk about standards rising, it is because the cost of bad choices has become crystal clear.
By midlife, women have gathered an immense amount of experiential data. They know intimately the heavy weight of emotional labor.
They know what it feels like to over-accommodate someone else's needs while ignoring their own.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They have lived through the unbalanced relationships where they were functioning as the project manager of the household and the emotional regulator for their partner.
So when they raise their standards, it is not an act of prudishness. It is the active application of advanced pattern recognition.
Yes. They can spot the red flags, the poor communication, the subtle boundary pushing, the entitlement, the lack of curiosity about their internal world from a mile away. And they just choose not to engage.
And this massive shift in female behavior fundamentally alters the landscape for men. We cannot audit the culture without addressing the ripple effect on the other side of the dynamic.
I really can't. We have to talk about the new male task.
Because when women stop performing, the old rules of engagement for men completely break down, don't they?
That is the reality. For a long time, the mainstream dating script allowed men to rely on generic pursuit. High-volume messaging, sending the same generic hey or a cut-and-paste compliment to 50 women was just a standard numbers game.
Right. But that simply does not work in an environment of high discernment.
Not at all. Posturing and performative masculinity completely fail to impress a woman who is operating from an internal center of gravity.
So to be chosen in this new landscape, men have to be readable in ways that actually matter.
Yeah. It is no longer about looking the part or displaying status symbols. It is about demonstrating genuine behavioral competence.
They must be calm. They must possess high social intelligence.
And they have to be sexually considerate, meaning they actually prioritize mutual pleasure and safety, and they must be highly consistent in their communication. If they say they will call, they call.
And crucially, they must be able to hear the word no without sulking, without becoming defensive, and without escalating the situation.
That's huge. The ability to accept a boundary gracefully is now a primary metric of attractiveness. In the past, persistence was culturally coded as romantic.
Oh, like in every rom-com from the 90s.
Exactly. Well, spot on. Now, persistence in the face of a boundary is correctly recognized as a threat.
Is this why some men experience women's discernment as a form of exclusion? Because they feel like the doors are suddenly being closed on them and they are vocalizing that frustration across social media and internet forums?
That is the pattern, right there. They feel excluded, but they aren't actually being excluded from the dating pool itself. The threshold for entry has just changed.
The baseline requirements for participation have been raised.
Yes. And if they rely on old habits, if they rely on entitlement rather than emotional intelligence, they will continually hit a wall. It isn't that women are building a wall to keep men out. They are building a door, and they are simply requiring men to learn how to knock and wait for an answer.
That reframing is incredibly important. Now, while this shift towards self-authorship and curiosity is healthy, we have to audit the shadow side of this behavior.
We do.
Because moving away from the mainstream script is good, but unstructured curiosity is not automatically a safe or productive thing. We need to distinguish between respectful curiosity and extractive curiosity.
Curiosity in itself is entirely valid. I mean, it is how we grow, explore new relationship styles, and understand ourselves. Respectful curiosity operates from a place of accountability. It says, I want to understand myself better, I want to move carefully, and I want to make informed, ethical decisions. It acknowledges the humanity and the vulnerability of the other people involved in the exploration.
Extractive curiosity, on the other hand, is purely consumptive.
Yeah.
It says, show me something exciting, give me a thrill, let me use your community to figure myself out. but do not ask me to take any responsibility for the interaction or the aftermath.
It is people wanting the atmosphere of openness without the discipline that makes that openness safe.
Think about the analogy of a tourist.
Yeah, go ahead.
Imagine a tourist walking into a deeply sacred cultural site. They want the aesthetic experience, right?
Same.
So they snap their photos with the flash on, they talk loudly over the quiet contemplation of others, they ignore the signs asking for silence, and then they leave their rubbish behind on the ancient stones for someone else to clean up.
It's incredibly disrespectful.
They want the benefit of the atmosphere without participating in the discipline that maintains it. That is extractive curiosity in a relational space. It is arriving in an intentional community and treating the people there like an amusement park ride.
And the devastating consequence of that extractive curiosity is that the burden of cleaning up the rubbish almost always falls on single women.
It does.
If these spaces remain too open and unstructured, single women end up acting as unpaid educators.
They become the boundary enforcers. They are the ones forced to constantly validate and guide people who are arriving with terrible habits formed in mainstream dating apps.
Just think about the exhaustion of having to patiently explain basic consent or communication etiquette to a grown adult on a Tuesday evening.
We have to be very clear about this. Women should not be the curriculum for someone else's awakening.
Spot on. It is an unfair distribution of emotional labor, and it actively drives the most intentional people out of the space entirely.
100%. And it is not just single women who get caught in the shadow side of unstructured curiosity. There is a significant trap for couples as well.
Couples often mistake a fun, theoretical fantasy for actual relational readiness.
This happens so frequently. A couple might be sitting on the sofa having a glass of wine on a Friday night, and they get intrigued by the idea of opening up their relationship or exploring swinging.
In the safety of their living room, the concept feels exciting and novel.
It feels like a way to inject energy into a long-term partnership. But interest arrives long before readiness.
The reality is that they often lack the foundational communication skills, the understanding of pacing, and the radical honesty required to do it safely.
Yeah.
They step into these spaces driven by the momentum of a fantasy, but they haven't done the actual work to ensure their relationship can withstand the reality of the experience.
They haven't discussed what happens if one person feels jealous or if one person receives more attention than the other.
Right. They are relying on the strength of their romantic bond to serve as a substitute for actual emotional regulation skills.
Which means we desperately need a solution. If the culture is exhausted and the behavior is shifting but still vulnerable to extractive habits, we need to audit the solution.
And that begins with a profound architectural shift in how these digital and physical spaces are designed. We cannot just rely on good intentions anymore. We have to design for consciousness.
We are looking at a blueprint that mandates growth before access. We are referencing the T-test blueprint, which is essentially the modern architectural standard for intentional dating spaces.
The solution to the exhaustion and the extractive behavior is replacing instant gratification with emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence must become the literal entry ticket to these spaces.
It is a fundamental paradigm shift.
It really is.
This requires building environments that are fundamentally female-defined. Spaces where single women set the behavioral and emotional tone from the ground up. It is not just about reacting to bad behavior after someone has already been harassed. It is about systemic safety by design.
Systemic safety means the protection is baked into the architecture of the platform or the community from the very first line of code or the very first interaction.
It goes far beyond having a few moderators review complaints after the damage is done and the user is already traumatized.
Right. We are talking about automated background checks to verify identities, ensuring that the person is who they say they are. We are talking about values-based onboarding.
And let's unpack values-based onboarding for a second, because it isn't just ticking a box that says, I agree to the terms and conditions that no one ever reads.
No, not at all.
It is an interactive process where people have to demonstrate their emotional quotient and their understanding of boundaries before they are even allowed in.
They are assessed on how they handle hypothetical rejections or complicated social scenarios.
We are also seeing the integration of AI moderation filters that catch unsolicited content before it ever reaches a user's screen.
Which is huge because the burden is removed from the victim to see and report the abuse. The system sanitizes the environment proactively.
And one of the most vital architectural features we are seeing implemented is the flag pause support protocol.
I love this protocol.
It is revolutionary for systemic safety. Think about human psychology when confronted with boundary-pushing behavior. Often, our immediate reaction is a freeze response.
Right, we don't know what to say, we don't want to cause a scene, so we placate the person.
Exactly. The flag pause support protocol dismantles that pressure entirely. It means that at any point, any member can freeze a conversation that feels uncomfortable or escalating in a direction they don't like.
It immediately halts the interaction and triggers confidential support. The other person cannot send another message.
It removes the pressure from the user to navigate a hostile or confusing situation alone.
The environment itself also has to reflect this intention. The visual and emotional tone of the space matters immensely.
It really does. It should feel calm, warm, and aspirational. If you design a space with harsh neon colors, flashing notifications, and aggressive gamification, like slot machine mechanics, you inherently encourage fast, thoughtless, dopamine-driven behavior.
But if you use soothing nature metaphors, think of a palette of dusty rose and leaf green, soft typography, uncluttered interfaces. You create a space that is sensual, yes, but never sexualized or exploitative.
It signals to the user's nervous system that this is a space for care, slowness, and intention. You wouldn't run and shout in a high-end spa because the environment tells you how to behave.
Digital environments must do the exact same thing.
And within that calming environment, you introduce gamified progression. But again, not the kind of gamification that encourages mindless swiping or racking up matches like points in a video game.
No, this is about maturing the community through visible, earned growth stages.
We see this beautifully illustrated using a botanical progression. It is a brilliant way to visually represent emotional readiness.
It is. Members start as a seed, representing their entry point. They progress to a sprout as they learn the ropes. Then they bloom as they actively and positively contribute to the community. And finally, they reach maintain.
They have to earn their access to the social arena, let's call it the garden, and they only get into the garden after they have completed their time in the tool shed.
The tool shed represents microlearning. It is structured, digestible education on vital concepts like consent, aftercare, and emotional regulation.
You cannot bypass it.
You really can't. For example, it might walk a user through what poor aftercare looks like, such as leaving immediately after intimacy without checking in, versus good aftercare, which involves communication, reassurance, and emotional grounding.
It teaches these concepts not as abstract theories, but as practical skills necessary for participation.
Right.
I have to pause here because I can hear people listening and thinking, isn't this just giving people homework before a date? I work 50 hours a week. I just want to meet someone. Why do I have to study?
It sounds a bit like returning to school. Yeah.
It does.
It is a common reaction, but we have to reframe that completely. It is not remedial homework. It is context before contact.
Context before contact.
Yes. Think about trying to play a highly complex physical sport without knowing the rules, the safety gear required, or the signals for a timeout. Someone is going to get hurt, and no one will have a good time.
Yeah.
This progression empowers people. It ensures everyone understands the shared language and the established boundaries before they make interpersonal mistakes that cost others emotionally. It is about equipping people for success rather than setting them up for failure.
Context before contact. That is a brilliant phrase to hold on to. And, it leads us directly into the specific pathways that bridge the gap from unstructured curiosity to genuine readiness.
We need a pilot strategy that breaks down the onboarding logic so members can clearly separate, I am interested in this, from, I am actually prepared to engage in this respectfully.
Let's audit these specific curiosity to readiness pathways.
So we start with Pathway 1, which is dedicated to single women. The core focus here is sovereignty first. The system must normalize their standards without ever making it feel like they are receiving a treatment or being subtly told they're too demanding or difficult.
It is entirely about setting the pace and putting the controls directly in their hands. Single women get to decide the sequence of their experience.
Yeah. Do they want to engage with the broader community forums first to get a sense of the culture? Do they want to start with one-on-one conversations? Or do they want a setting where there is absolutely no direct contact permitted unless they initiate it themselves?
They define their non-negotiables up front. They articulate what they do not wish to explain twice.
Which is such a relief.
Right. For instance, if a woman explicitly states on her profile that she requires a slow burn and multiple public dates before intimacy, the system supports this.
The architecture provides tools like save declines. so they don't have to repeatedly type out exhausting, delicate rejections to men who didn't read their profile.
It saves their emotional energy. And there are profile signals that explicitly and visibly state that women control the pace here. It removes the ambiguity that so often leads to pressure.
Then we have Pathway 2, which focuses on single men. The goal here is to integrate their genuine curiosity without weakening the behavioral gate.
Because men are traditionally taught to shoot their shot and pursue aggressively, this environment requires unlearning that entirely. They have to prove they understand the environment and can read the room.
The very first step for single men is confronting the question, why are you here?
This is crucial for separating genuine relational readiness from simple loneliness, boredom, or the desire for quick external validation.
They are then taken through scenario-led routing.
Now, what does scenario-led routing actually mean? Are we putting them in a virtual simulator?
Essentially, yes. We're testing their actual reflexes, not their theoretical manners. The system might present a scenario where a match suddenly changes her mind about meeting up and it gauges the man's response.
Does he demand an explanation? Does he get defensive? Or does he accept the boundary with grace?
Right. This tests their actual fluency in navigating consent, reading tone, and demonstrating respectful initiative.
And crucially, they must practice concise, low-pressure initiation. Before the direct messaging function is even unlocked for them, they have to demonstrate that they know how to reach out without demanding an immediate response or crossing a boundary.
They learn to send a message that leaves the door open without applying weight to it. Respect cannot just be a vague vibe they claim to have in their bio. It must be completely visible and verified in their demonstrated behavior within the system.
Which brings us to Pathway 3, couples. This pathway is designed around what we can call the vestibule check.
Yes, the vestibule check. It is about helping pairs separate the momentum of a fun Friday night idea from actual mutual agreement and readiness.
Because the risk of asymmetry in couples is incredibly high. Think about the cool girl trope, where one partner pretends to be perfectly fine with opening up the relationship or engaging in non-monogamy just to keep the partnership intact or to avoid seeming like a prude.
The vestibule check dismantles this dynamic by isolating the partners.
It removes the social pressure of the living room. Each partner must independently state what they hope for from the experience and, equally importantly, what they fear.
The system is actively looking for those discrepancies. Is one partner moving much faster than the other? Is one person just accommodating their partner's desires to avoid conflict while secretly feeling terrified of abandonment?
The vestibule check surfaces these critical issues before they become crises involving third parties.
They also have to agree on definitive stop conditions. They must establish precisely how either of them can pause the entire process at any moment without facing a penalty, resentment, or pressure from the other partner.
If one person uses the agreed-upon safe word or signal to stop, the process halts immediately. All of this foundational communication must be solidified before they ever reach the community stage.
It is about building a foundation of radical honesty before adding the immense complexity of other people's emotions and bodies into the mix. Today, we have truly mapped out the necessary evolution of how we connect.
We have explored how the sheer exhaustion of mainstream dating, that noisy fast food queue, is actively driving a search for deep intention.
We've seen how women raising their standards and trusting their pattern and recognition is a powerful act of agency and discernment, completely unrelated to the societal myths about age and relevance.
And we have seen that true, sustainable connection requires us all to move from mindless, consumptive curiosity to a place of conscious responsibility. It requires us to build and participate in systems that demand emotional intelligence as the baseline for entry.
So as you move forward, we want to leave you with 3 highly useful takeaways. First, audit your own curiosity. Ask yourself honestly, are you seeking genuine connection and a deeper understanding of yourself and others, or are you just looking for a distraction without having to take on any responsibility? Be clear about your own intentions.
Second, respect your pattern recognition. If a dynamic or a conversation feels like hard work, or if it subtly demands that you shrink your boundaries to keep the peace, trust that instinct. High standards are not a flaw. They are a sign of robust emotional health. You are allowed to protect your peace.
Third, and perhaps most importantly, remember the principle of context before contact. In any relationship or even a brief interaction, slow down enough to establish mutual language, agree on the pace, and ensure absolute consent before you rush into the experience itself.
How often do we skip the context because we are addicted to the speed? Taking the time to build that context is the ultimate act of respect, both for yourself and for the people you engage with.
It changes everything about the quality of the connections we form.
Thanks for listening. We hope we've helped you uncover a deeper understanding around connecting with other people and giving you the courage to be honest with yourself, your partner, and those people you connect with. Our only ask is if you know one person you feel would benefit from listening to our conversation, please point them in our direction. Let's start a conversation about how we can build better connections.
And if you have any questions, a theme, or a topic you'd like us to cover, please give us a like, leave a comment, and we'll get it scheduled into the running order.
Be kind to yourself.
Until next time, less scrolling, more soul.